We have just passed the halfway point of the Norway Chess 2020 tournament, and there's a few developing storylines. In case you haven't been watching all of the recap videos, I'll just get right to the gist of it. Magnus Carslen yesterday had his 125-game unbeaten streak in Classical snapped by Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Alireza Firouzja is having a great tournament. Duda himself is having a terrible tournament, right up until yesterday when he beat Magnus. And today, they flip the round robin, so all of the matchups now get inverted, and actually there's a rematch of every single game that occurred yesterday. So to kick things off, we have Carlsen with white against Duda. Let's see if Magnus can take revenge for the loss yesterday. He starts things out with going into Duda's Slav defense. Duda is, at this point, playing this defense a lot, and he goes for e3, Magnus. Which doesn't look like it's any different than just developing your pieces normally. In fact, it can go back into being a main line. And Duda does something like this rather than developing his bishop because he'll play b6 and bishop b7 and then bishop d6. This is a very solid setup with black. Not something that I necessarily recommend for beginners because there's not always a comfortable central space or just space in general. So that's exactly what happens. Magnus continues his development. And then here doesn't play the move knight f3. He plays knight e2, which is kind of his entire point. Magnus is always good at finding wrinkles in positions that have just been played the same way forever. And we see now, after the players both castle and Magnus plays knight g3, I asked Hikaru during the broadcast that we were doing together, I said, most positions, this knight is here. So what is the difference? Like where this knight is placed? Here you don't fight for this square, you don't defend the center, but you do defend this and this. And so black is going to play e5. Normally that's a good break, but it's not going to work in this position because white is just going to land this knight on f5. And first of all, you attack the bishop, but second of all, you exert pressure on the king side. You're not going to take that, but your knight will linger there and it will be annoying. So Duda broke in the center with c5, and Magnus found a way to really intelligently kill the tension. He takes on d5, and Duda takes on d4, hitting his knight. So Magnus plays knight to e4, rather than taking like this, because this would have been inaccurate. Now Duda would have just played knight takes d5, and this position here is very bad for white, because you've blocked out your own bishop. It's going to stare into the central pawn, whereas black is going to have two open bishops, because all this knight has to do is move. Yes, for a move, white can play a checkmate threat, but black goes here, attacks the queen, defends mate, position is pretty bad. So Magnus goes knight e4, and Duda takes on g3, and Magnus just takes back. And now Duda could have just taken on d5, like let's say bishop d5, bishop d4. And the pawn structure is literally the same. They have the identical structure, but white has two bishops versus just one bishop for Duda. And he's, they're staring at the king here. And it's just a little bit unpleasant. It's just not a position you want against Magnus. So instead, Duda took on e3, and Magnus took on e6, and Duda took on f2 with check, and back on e6. So he does this instead. He says, look, you're going to have two bishops, but at least I'm going to have an extra pawn. The problem is that his position is insanely passive. And so after a move like queen to e2, the point of which is you want to put the rook here, knight c5, bishop comes back. He pops his bishop out to a6, and Magnus just goes back to e1. It's a very uncomfortable position for Duda. Now, if I was him, I would strongly look at a move like, look at a move like knight to d3. And the point is that you really want this to happen. The issue here is that this just gives away the e6 pawn. So now you don't even have a pawn advantage. And now I'm staring at you with potentially 4 pieces. And I'm going to bring my 5th and just very uncomfortably pin your bishop to your queen. So super, super uncomfortable position to be playing against somebody like Magnus Carlsen. And so for that reason, Duda doesn't go for knight d3, he goes, knight d3, he goes queen e8, guarding, wants to bring his rook, but rook d1, and now that's no longer an option, and rook c8. So at this point, believe it or not, the engine was giving like +4 for Magnus, some insane evaluation, +4 meaning that if you gave black 4 points of material, it would be equal. And let's not forget, black is already up 1 pawn, so really it's +5. It's 4 points to advantage, to Magnus's advantage, yet he's down a pawn. And he plays b4, sending this knight packing. The knight really isn't going to be able to come forward because there's bishop f6. And no matter what happens, you're going to have to bring this pawn. Like, for example, rook f6, gf6. and something very straightforward like knight to e4. And it's almost impossible to defend this pawn because the queen has to stay guarding the knight. So if you bring the king, I bring my queen, it's over. I'm going to attack you with too many pieces. So Duda goes all the way back to b7. Knight e4 comes anyway because, again, if he takes it, here queen e4 threatens a checkmate. And if he plays something like g6, I threaten a new checkmate with my other bishop. And if you offer me a trade of queens, it's actually funny. I'm not going to take. Yes, I can take, and win a pawn, but when you're the attacking side, you don't want to. You don't want to win a pawn and trade the queens. You play queen e5. And if rook takes c2, yes, you are defending the rook, but rook c2. And you're not actually defending the rook. I lied. Remember, your queen was doing a job over there. It has to guard against mate. There's just no way here to deal with Magnus's bishops. They're way too strong. Playing something like queen h6 and trying to hang into the game, there's even things like bishop c1, just dislodging the queen from the defense, or bishop b3 going for e6 instead. These pieces are just not playing. And that's really what happened in the game. Those pieces didn't move. Magnus simplifies, queen b4, and jumps in with knight to f6. Beautiful little tactical shot, opening up this. And Duda doesn't take just so he can get out of check. Rook a8, and yeah, Duda is already setting up for the next game. Queen takes d5, and it was here that Duda actually just resigned. Because if you play g takes f6, I'm going to play queen h5 or queen f5 or even bishop takes f6 mate. There was mate in 1 in that position. I must have made a small mistake. Where was the mistake? Ah, sorry. Yes, of course, if g f6, bishop f6 is mate. I apologize. But if queen takes b2, then you play queen f5 or queen e4. I'm sorry. I mixed up my variations. And the point is that there's just no way to prevent this checkmate. Taking the knight doesn't do anything, and if something like g6, you just bring in the queen to e7, and there's nothing that can be done. But we filmed these in one take, so sorry about that, in the absence of a Godmator. Well, Magnus strikes back. And maybe begins a new streak of 125 games. Tough game for Duda. I mean, absolutely clobbered. Let's see a rematch of yesterday. Aronian versus Caruana. So this one was a Sicilian. And c3 basically turns this into what's called an Alpin Sicilian. Take, and d4, knight a3. Very tricky variation. Good for beginners. Knight b5, knight c7, all sorts of tactics like this. And if black plays like a6, thinking that he prevents the knight coming to b5, there's things like knight c4 here, threatening this, and black has to defend very passively. So the c3 Sicilian, also known as the Alpin Sicilian. They got out to a pretty theoretical position, right around here. And then in this position, Fabi played a really weird move. And he played it really fast. He played knight e7, which just doesn't look necessary. And the thing is that during the game, Aronian was really taking his time through all of these moves, you know, bringing the rooks, bringing the other rook. And at this point, despite having a perfect position, really, I mean, everything defended, all the pieces out, it's time to start, you know, taking the positions to the next level. He was down like 30, 40 minutes on the clock. Fabi was just playing super fast. I want you guys to conceptualize a plan here for white. See if you can pause, really. Pause if you have some time. Look at the position for like a minute or two and come up with where white really has an advantage on which side of the board and how you will actually pursue that advantage and take it to the next level. Well, that plan is g3. To take away the f4 square from any of these pieces and to advance with h4, h5. Because you are looking this way. And that's exactly what he does. He plays h4. And queen d2, trying to get the queen over to h6. So bishop f8. Now h5. Knight comes back. And a great idea again from Levon. Bishop c2. Rook d8 played. And really, when you look at bishop c2, the point is to play queen d3 and threaten checkmate. And at this point, Levon spent 12 minutes on the move queen to d3. Which is so weird. Because really, the only two options here were queen d3 and playing g4 right away. Because as you'll see, Fabi plays f5. Now, Levon, with like, 20 minutes on the clock or something, plays another move in 12 minutes. G4. Of course, the point being that if pawn takes, there is queen takes h7 checkmate. Fabiano thinks for a while and plays f6. Levon thinks for another 4 or 5 minutes. and plays g5, trying to crash through. Levon apparently could have, instead of g4, played knight g5, attacking this and forcing the bishop to come back, with a very nice idea here, queen to e2. Point is that you unpin your queen, and now you're threatening knight takes e6 with devastating effect, hitting every one of these pieces, and the queen can arrive in the future on e5. Right now, you don't want a queen trade, but in the future, once you kick this queen away, that is what you'll want. He didn't see that, and after g5, queen f4, g takes f6, queen g4, Levon played king f1, and actually during the broadcast, I was like, okay, they're just going to draw. Queen h3, king g1, queen g4, etc. They're just going to draw the game. But Levon thought for a little bit, and in this position played the absolutely insane move king to e2. Running his king toward his center, and Fabi, began fighting, I mean, obviously. But the thing is that this is move 27. Levon at this point has about 5 minutes to make 13 moves, because on the 40th move of this time control is when you actually get your bonus time. Let's not forget the time control. Levon really has his time ticking down the whole time it's his move, with no extra time added until he gets to move 40. Now, in this position, there was some absolutely insane variations. I mean, just unbelievable. Like here, Fabi can go bishop b5, and obviously you can't take because of your queen. c4, knight d5. Can't take this because of this. Can't take the bishop because of this. So here, you would play knight takes e6. And what that does is that it covers the f4 square and it attacks the rook. So here, black would play rook d6, okay? And here, white would play knight f d4, okay? Opening up a queen trade. Black would play queen takes h5, check, and white would play king to d2, okay? Then in this position, black can play a lot of different things, but in particular, black can play bishop h6 check. Then you would cover up with f4, and then if black plays knight f4, there is knight f4, bishop f4, and king c3. This is what the engine was recommending at some point. And of course, the evaluation of the engine here is like 0, 0, 0. Meaning the position is insanely unclear, and it's not obvious at all, and it's just chaos. But, of course, that didn't happen. Fabi instead played knight to d5, and then we got queen d2, bishop b5 takes, and a very nice idea here, queen g4. The point of this is not to take back, but rather to play knight to f4. So Levon thought for a long time, like 5 more minutes, like 4 of his remaining 5 minutes, and played queen g5, knight f4 check, and king e3. And we just assumed that after the knight g2, we would get a repetition. King e2, knight f4, king e3, and back. But again, Levon has 8 moves, and he has about 35-40 seconds to make them. So Fabi plays queen c4 check, bishop d3, and sacrifices on d3. The point is that after rook d3, there is knight f4 check, defended, and attacking the king and the rook. But in this position, there was a stunning defensive resource. Levon could have played knight e5, counterattacking the queen and the rook, and even though a move like rook e3 is double check, after king d2, you are completely safe. In some completely unbelievable turn of events, if black plays something like rook d8 check, you play king c1 and you're completely safe. You've made it out alive. It looks like you castled queenside, but you haven't. I mean, just one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Just king c1, but he played rook d3, and then with like 15 seconds on the clock played this, blundering the fact that after queen d3, king f4, it's good, but blundering queen e4. Forcing the king back this way, picks up a rook, picks up a horse, and after f7, threatening queen g8, queen g4 was played. Beautiful defense from Fabiano. Everything is guarded. And here, black would just be up a bishop. So Levon Aronian resigned. I'm not sure if he resigned or he lost on time because he had 4 seconds to make the last 2 moves until he gets the bonus time. And Fabiano gets revenge for yesterday and wins. So Levon very much had winning chances. It was an absolutely insane game, but very poor time management. That's really what it came down to, spending like 90% of his remaining time on decisions that, well, I mean, he could have played a little bit faster. That's really the reality of the situation. But, you know, we cheer for Levon. Levon was actually the leader of this tournament going into today, so hopefully he can bounce back. In the final game of the round, we had Tari with white and Firouzja with black. Yesterday, the colors were reversed, and yesterday, Firouzja actually did win. So, let's see how Tari takes revenge. e4, and Firouzja continues to play the Caro-Kann, an exchange variation, bishop d3, knight f6. Normally I play knight c6 myself, but it's interesting to see Alireza go for this without actually putting the knight on c6 first. The players got a position where pieces were developed very casually. Alireza here not worried about something like this. This is not dangerous at all. In fact, this could be very dangerous for white and not for black. This queen is not positioned to attack the king, and black will play king h8, rook g8, and actually launch an attack on you. So knight d2, but the second the knight gets a chance to move, it does. And it moves to h5. Now we get queen back to d1, knight f6, sorry, bishop e3, knight f4, and bishop back to f1. Here, Alireza throws a punch. g5. He's not messing around, and frankly speaking, I don't blame him. I mean, Alireza's had a very good tournament, so the same side, king side attack. Very impressive from him. Tari breaks in the center with c4, very good move. If dc4, white will play like bishop c4, knight c4, and just be pressuring you. So Firouzja doesn't take on c4, and plays king h8, anticipating the opening of the g-file, and also in the future you're going to want to play g4, so you want your rook behind the pawn. We get rook c1, and Tari begins counterattacking on the queen side with moves like b4. Alireza plays queen d6, a very interesting idea. Kind of like, I don't know, like putting your head down on the opponent, you know? It's like, yeah, come hit me. Come, do your best. And the point here is that after b5, he brings his knight and rotates it actually toward Tari's king. So this attack is not really going anywhere. And after c5, queen c7, it's not really clear what's being attacked, you know? If you play c6, I mean, I'm just gonna take and take and take. And this position is just not pleasant, despite you opening the queen side. But Tari here gets a little bit too bold. Plays a move g3. And, well, first of all, Firouzja can just sacrifice. There's a lot of variations where he can sacrifice this piece and play g4, breaking open the position. The rook comes into the party, knight f5, and so on. Double up is just over. But in the game, he plays g4, and the point is that, well, if you take on f4, I take on f3, and it's check. So hg4, rook g4, and, oof, my neck is stiff. I had to crack it. So, rook comes back to g7, and you can't take the pawn on e6. You can't take the pawn on e6 because I'm just going to go here, and I crash through with my queen and my rook, and you're just lost. So he plays king to h1, but e5 now, and now the two bishops stare at each other, so take, but now the queen is coming in. So Tari goes for the cocoon defense, you know? Like this. Trying to do his best Yoel Romero impression. Yeah, Alireza is no Israel Adesanya. He actually will engage queen h3, rook g1, and rook g8. And you still can't take this bishop at any moment because of the amazing move rook g2. So for example, if knight f3 defending, there is e4, simply removing the defender of the knight. There's nothing that can be done. Rook g2, queen g2. And if you play queen f1, you're too late. It doesn't matter. I've glued everything. I've just glued everything shut. So, instead of taking the bishop, he plays queen e2, but e4 shuts the door. You're never going to open the position. Your knight cannot get to f3. And the game ends after rook c3, knight f5. The final pieces join the party. A sacrifice backed by Tari, but bishop g3, and it is all over. Rook e7, knight guards the queen, queen guards the knight. Sorry, knight guards the rook, queen guards the knight, and rook e1 check is just unstoppable. Unless you play queen b1, but then rook here, and it's all over. If you play rook c1, I can win in a variety of ways, but the easiest is bishop takes h2, rook h2, and I believe queen f3 and some rook coming to the g file. So like rook g2, rook g8. It's misery. Not a good position at all. And Alireza Firouzja wins again in classical against Aryan Tari. And so after 6 days of this tournament, here are our standings. It is Firouzja with 13 points, Carlsen with 12, Aronian 11, and Caruana with 10. Duda and Tari are struggling, but Duda did get a classical win over Magnus Carslen, and that's why he does have 4 overall, because he got 3 points for that victory. Hope you all continue to enjoy the coverage of the tournament. At the time of recording, we have one more day left of the sale on the GothamChess courses website. You can take a look at the description below. And that's pretty much all for now. Check out a couple of those videos. You want to go through some of my playlists on instructive content. A lot of you asked me for, different videos on concepts and strategy. I have those. Just go look through my playlist. The whole chess tips playlist is that. Okay? I'll catch you in the next video.